York City with the first day of testimony in Sean Diddy Combs' federal sex crimes trial. After seating a jury of 8 men and 4 women, the prosecution delivered its opening statement, and they came out swinging. Prosecutor Emily Johnson said the public knew Diddy as a larger-than-life business mogul, but behind the scenes, he was forcing women into sex, using violence and drugs to keep them in line. She said Combs had an inner circle that helped him commit sex crimes, drug crimes, other crimes, things like arson and kidnapping. And then came the graphic details from what we now know are called the freak-offs, where Diddy allegedly recorded sexual encounters that he'd arranged between paid escorts and his alleged victims, including his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Now, the feds say Diddy once forced an escort to urinate on Cassie. That came out in court today. When it was the defense's turn, they didn't deny Diddy's temper. They said, yes, he can be violent. They admitted that. Remember, that's not what he's on trial for. They said, yes, he's got anger issues, and his actions might warrant domestic violence charges. It was clever that they said that. But trafficking and racketeering, again, that's what the federal case is about. The defense says those don't apply. And all that freak-off sex, according to the defense, they say it was consensual. They said that Diddy's love of baby oil, and this was actually a quote, they said the love of baby oil was not a federal crime. Cassie Ventura did not take the stand today. She is expected to be there tomorrow, and she'd better soon. This is another very interesting part of all of this. She is about to give birth to her 3rd child any minute now, and she's about to get on the witness stand, about to have a baby. Another twist. 2 witnesses were called today, including a former security officer at the hotel, where Diddy is seen on video attacking Ventura brutally. You remember that video back in 2016. The prosecutors played the video. The witness testified that Diddy tried to pay him off with a giant wad of cash. The day's second witness was a male escort. This is where it really got very juicy, who says that he was paid by Diddy numerous times to have sex with Cassie while Diddy sat there in the corner, masturbating, and watched. He says he once saw Diddy throw a liquor bottle at Cassie and heard him beating her in another room. And in court today for all of this was Lauren Conlin. That's the host of the hugely popular true crime podcast, The Outlier, and Pop Crime TV on YouTube. There she is. There's Lauren. Also joining me now, NewsNation national correspondent Caitlin Becker, who has also been all over the story. I want to start with you, Lauren, though, because I am so intrigued by what it must look like and feel like inside that courthouse. With these federal cases, we don't get to see anything, just those very weird, like, cartoonish sketches. What was it like in court? What's it like with Diddy's family there? Apparently he was blowing kisses at the kids. Sort of describe the mood for us.
Yes, Brian, it's wild. Let me tell you, Diddy did appear nervous at first. He asked the judge for a little bit more water, but then you're right. He blew kisses to his mother in the front row. He seemed to give a thumbs up at one point. At another point in time, he was flipping through a Bible, reading a Bible. And if you'll notice, he's wearing these crew neck sweaters, this light color, which I think is pretty smart as a defendant, but he's kind of reminding me of a Menendez brother here, you know? It's really interesting how defendants are dressed. I always make sure to pay attention to that. And additionally, his mother, Janice Combs, she walked into the lobby this morning looking incredibly somber, like she was dressed for a funeral. All black suit, black bag. It sounds like she got the memo here. But we'll get into it, Brian, I'm sure. But there was a lot of things today in court. I could not believe what I was hearing. I was incredibly uncomfortable. And yeah, in the government's opening statement, Emily Johnson actually said that Cassie did choke on the urine of an escort when Diddy forced this escort to allegedly urinate in her mouth. They did say inner circle numerous times, I believe, really trying to amplify the RICO charges. Diddy couldn't have done all of these crimes without his inner circle, right? Without his bodyguard, without his driver, without his assistant. They talked about alleged kidnappings, that one time He kidnapped his assistant to go and try to find Cassie when he thought Cassie was cheating. I mean, it was wild. I feel like I could go on forever, but I won't.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, the details are gross, and I think it's only going to get worse for you, Lauren, having to be in there. They start talking about the urination. I can only imagine where it's going to go from here. Caitlin, what about Cassie? I mean, a lot of people thought we were going to see Cassie today. You saw the photo. She is 9 months pregnant. Is she expected tomorrow? Sort of what's the plan?
She is, Brian. She's the third witness on the prosecution's witness list. We're going to have about an hour of redirect and recross tomorrow morning with the escort who was on the stand at the end of today. And then Cassie will take the stand. Her testimony is expected to go for the rest of the week. As you can see, she is extremely pregnant. So they're going to be doing her testimony slightly differently. They're going to be doing it in 90-minute increments so that she has breaks in between there to kind of rest, recover, use the bathroom if she needs it. I mean, like you see, she's very, very pregnant there, so they're going to handle it a little bit different. But this was actually a point of contention early on in the proceedings today because they were trying to decide whether or not, because of her condition, if they wanted her to be seated in the witness stand before the jury came in or to have her walk in. And then, the two attorneys on each side were kind of butting heads about that, having questions about whether or not it would be too prejudicial to have her already sitting there, or if it would be beneficial to have her walking in, if it would influence the jury if they saw how pregnant she was when she was walking. So there were some questions about that early on in the proceedings today, Brian, but we do expect to see her tomorrow, and her testimony to, like I said, last throughout the week. So they're going to get in. I mean, we thought it was graphic today. It's going to become extremely graphic and extremely hard to hear once she is on that witness stand.
Yeah, and I'm going to get to the fact that she's 9 months pregnant and the impact that could have on the trial in a second with our legal panel. Because think about that. I mean, that's a visual there for the jury. She's going to get up on the stand about to have a baby. There's sympathy there. How does that play? And we're going to get to that in a second. But Caitlin, Cassie's husband, Alex Fine, was he spotted in court today? I mean, has he been in and out of the courtroom?
We saw him today walking in. He sort of slipped in during the lunch break when all of Diddy's kids and his mom were coming in and out of court. You see him walking in there. Our producer, Ava, happened to have been walking in at the exact same time as he was. So we were kind of expecting to maybe see Cassie today, but he went into the courthouse and tried to go into the courtroom proper, to sit in the same room where Diddy is being tried, but was escorted out. And then he actually listened to a good chunk of the proceedings from one of the overflow rooms where a lot of the media has to be. So he was in there today. Like I said, Cassie not in there today, and I don't anticipate us seeing her walk in, Brian. I mean, we have photographers and cameramen all over the outside of this courthouse hoping to see her as she goes in, but because of how pregnant she is, I would not be surprised if they took her in a different entrance so that she didn't have to walk through the throng of media outside.
Lauren, tell me a little more about this male escort, the vibe that you got from him. What does he actually look like? Because all we've seen, again, are the very cartoonish, courtroom sketches. Did you find his testimony believable? Obviously, some of the stuff he said, I mean, the fact that Diddy's in the corner masturbating, he's having sex with Cassie. What did you make of it?
Yes, I found his testimony to be incredibly believable. He seemed genuinely affected by what he saw happen to Cassie. This man truly seemed to care about Cassie. He did have, whatever you want to call it, some kind of relationship with her for probably about 1.5 years. And he actually testified that he, at a certain point, wasn't able to perform for Diddy and Cassie. He got erectile dysfunction because of what he saw. He said he saw Diddy at one point after an encounter drag Cassie by the hair from her computer seat all the way back to her bedroom while she was kicking and screaming and crying. And after she apologized and came out, he said that Diddy said, okay, you guys want to continue? And he couldn't perform. And that was it. From there, he could not perform after that. And he saw Diddy abuse Cassie 2 or 3 more times after that as well. And this is a muscular guy. He was 41 years old, a bit smaller, but again, he seemed incredibly affected by what he saw.
And was there, just quickly, Lauren, was there a point where he talked about, because I was trying to follow the blogs, again, it's hard, you were in there, it's difficult for us on the outside. Did he talk about Cassie at one point being under the influence of drugs to the point that she was slumped over and Diddy still wanted him to have sex with her?
He did talk about that. He said that he showed up one night and Cassie appeared to be high on something and she was slumped over on the couch. But he said that Diddy said, I don't think it's going to happen tonight. I think a lot of things seem to get twisted based on what everyone is hearing. And because we can't have phones or laptops in the courtroom, everyone's taking notes. So yeah, certain things are a little bit different, I guess, on each news outlet. But I specifically noted here, Cassie was too messed up on something that night. So they could not go through with the alleged freak off.
Yeah, well, listen, I bet your hand is tired from taking notes all day. I know who that is when they don't allow the laptops or the phones in. We're not used to it. Lauren Conlon, appreciate you very much. Caitlin Becker, as always, thank you. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow night. Get some sleep.
Thanks.
Okay, let's get to our panel now. I'm joined now by Trent Copeland, trial lawyer and legal analyst, and also Joe Tacopina, a defense attorney who says he was invited to join Diddy's legal team but said no. Joe, I want to start with you. Again, you were asked to be on the team. What do you make of this defense that came out today in the openings, basically saying, yes, Diddy is morally wrong, but none of this is actually against the law. It was consensual.
That's what this all comes down to. I mean, this case comes down to one issue at the end of the day, consent. Was this an issue of consent? Was it not? I mean, did these people consent to being there? Look, everyone wanted to be at a Diddy party. Everyone wanted to be part of these Diddy parties and be in his orbit when he was Diddy. Now, when someone got paid a lot of money, and now there's a federal investigation, everyone is looking to get a payday. All of a sudden, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, how many ever years ago it was, a decade ago, they weren't consenting. They realize now it wasn't consensual. I have a hard time with that. I'm not saying this case is a walk in the park, but I've read articles here about how Diddy is cooked, and this case is a fait accompli. Not by a long shot. This case will come down to an issue of consent, and I got to tell you, I know for a fact, and you mentioned I dabbled a little bit in deciding whether I was going to join the team or not. I know for a fact they have text messages that will refute a lot of these issues that the prosecution's holding out as far as these people not consenting. I know they do, and I know there's going to be text messages that will refute the issue, the fact that people saying, "Oh, I didn't consent," or "I didn't want to be there." Those messages, unless an alien sort of invaded their body or took their phone and created those text messages, are not going to be helpful to the credibility of these witnesses.
So, Joe, they asked you to be on the team. I'm just curious why. I mean, it's a big case. I think it'd be pretty exciting. Why did you decide not to do it?
There's a lot of reasons. I'm not going to get into that now. I mean, I've discussed it multiple times, but it was a lot of reasons, personal reasons, timing reasons. I just got off a big trial in LA for 6 weeks with ASAP, Rocky, and just there was a whole host of things. A lot of it was a timing issue. A lot of it was business decision, and that's it. I said nothing against Diddy. I met with him several times. I think he has a very defensible case, a very tribal case. When you see in federal court, and I've been in federal court hundreds and hundreds of times, an opening statement that talks about urination and baby oil in the prosecution's opening statement as being the crux of the opening statement. I mean, I just never thought I'd see that day. And that's what we had today. We had an opening statement and the evidence in large part talking about urination, sex, not rape, but sex, baby oil, escorts. It's just things that you would never imagine hearing in a United States District Court. That's what we heard today, and that was a large part of the testimony of the day.
Well, I remember, Joe, when the charging documents first came out, when all this went down, it was all about the baby oil. Remember, they talked about, I forget, it was like hundreds or thousands of bottles of baby. I mean, that was a big part of this. Yeah, that was a big part of this from the beginning. Trent, I want to go to you. Joe talked about the fact that it was a female prosecutor who gave the openings, but it was also a female defense attorney, Tenny Garagos. I'm assuming, Trent, that's by design.
Of course, it's by design. The reality is this is a case about sexual assault, sexual violence, and having a woman, whether you're the prosecutor or the defense, speaking first to the jury conveys to them a sense of understanding, a sense of compassion, a sense of, here's a woman, but the prosecutor side, who's telling the story about a woman or women who've potentially been abused. And from the defense perspective, their view is if we put a woman up front and center and she tells the story for Diddy, she operates as his attorney, as his spokesperson, as his mouthpiece, then that really will more likely than not resonate to the jury in a way that having a man say the same thing wouldn't. And so look, and by the way, always good to see my friend Joe, but Joe says he's surprised about what he heard in this case. The reality is I'm surprised too, everyone is, but we shouldn't be, because it's a case about a criminal enterprise dedicated towards sex and appealing to the very basic sexual appetites of Diddy. And there's no way we're going to have this trial, and there's no way we're going to not hear about baby oil. There's no way we're not going to hear about all of the abuse and the urination if we don't talk about those things. So yeah, we're going to see this. This may be one of one, but it's all important. It's all necessary. And I don't regard what the prosecutors did today as being extra, as being surplusage. I think what they did today was paint the picture exactly what this case is and what it's all about in all of its graphic detail.
Oh, I agree with that, by the way.
Tomorrow,
Trent's right on. I agree with that. I just am still shocked that this case is in a federal district court. I agree with, based on this case, they have to say that stuff. But I still can't believe this is a racketeering case in the United States District Court. That's what I can't believe.
Totally.
Tomorrow, Joe's going to be a big day, obviously, with Cassie set to take the stand. 9 months pregnant. You saw the photo. They're already making accommodations. She may take a break every 30 minutes or so. You know, if you're Diddy's defense attorney, that can't be good for them. I mean, she obviously is going to come across, I would think, more sympathetic. You almost feel sorry for her having to do this while she's that pregnant. I mean, how does that play into the defense strategy, Joe?
It's a fact. It's a fact she's pregnant. But, you know, it was Cassie who started all this. Let's remind the jury of that. I mean, it was Cassie who asked for $30 million for a manuscript of a book that she was going to write. And if she didn't get $30 million for her manuscript, she was going to print the book. And it was Cassie who then said, well, if you don't give me the money for the book, I am going to sue you unless you give me $30 million. And so it was Cassie who never went to the police. But made all these demands. And then when she didn't get what she wanted, she sued and then got $20 million. Still have not yet gone to the police at that point. So, you know, I think you could remove the veneer of being a nice pregnant lady. I'm not saying she's not a nice lady. I don't know her at all. She could be a very nice lady. And of course, anyone who's pregnant has a sympathetic, you know, sort of veneer on them, right? But let's be real. You know, she was a part of this, and she enjoyed and reaped the benefits of it. I'm not saying the disgusting things he did to her are excusable. If I were the defense, I would be more aggressive condemning the acts of Combs against her, the domestic violence acts against her, than the prosecution is. I would be more aggressive, but that is not what this case is about. This is not a racketeering case, not sex trafficking. That is a domestic violence case. And it's a bad and despicable act, but it's not sex trafficking. It's not racketeering. And they have to be very upfront with that and show that that's trying to replace the void where the evidence should be. They're using that tape to sort of replace the void where the evidence should be by appealing to emotions. Because that tape is horrific. It's horrific. And so I don't know. I understand she's pregnant and all that stuff. The jurors are smart. They're going to listen to, they're going to feel sympathetic for her, but at the end of the day, they're going to value her credibility. And when the defense shows her a text message the day after an incident where she's now going to say, I didn't want to be there. I hated being there. He forced me to be there. And the day after, she sends a text message contemporaneously saying, thank you for last night. It was amazing. You know, you're an amazing man. It's going to be tough for her to explain that, I think.
But do you think, Trent, that the jury will see through that in the sense that relationships are complicated, abusive relationships are complicated? I think most people know that. You can be abused and then the next second be sending a text that says, I love you because you like the rich lifestyle, but you're also being abused.
No, I think that's right. And two things can both be true at the same time. Look, here's the first thing. Cassie Ventura walking into that courtroom pregnant and then testifying about a previous trauma, while it doesn't prove anything, and Joe's correct about that, it is not a factual piece of evidence, her simply walking into the courtroom, but optics matter. Optics matter, Brian. And when she walks in that courtroom with all her vulnerabilities as a very, very pregnant woman, talking very emotionally about what was a past trauma, believe me, it will matter to the jury. And by the way, the video, and Joe's right, the video again, this isn't a case about domestic violence. This isn't a case about what happened in that horrific video. What this is about power, control, and abuse, and that's what the video shows, and the video demonstrates that this wasn't just an isolated incident, it was an ongoing issue for Diddy.
In New York City, where the star prosecution witness took the stand today in Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking and racketeering trial. And before we go any further, a warning for you. It's late. We still got to give you the warning, though. What you're about to hear, graphic and disturbing. There's a lot that we can't even say on TV. And even for a case packed with shocking details, what came out today, it really was next level. Cassie Ventura, Diddy's on again, off again girlfriend of many years. She's married now. She's due to give birth any second. So prosecutors did not waste any time getting her story to the jury. She was up on the witness stand first thing this morning, just minutes after being sworn in. She was shown an image from that 2016 hotel surveillance video of Diddy beating her. You see, we've got the courtroom sketches here. She was asked to describe it, and she said, "That is me and Sean. We were having an encounter. We call it a freak-off." And those freak-offs are what Cassie said became her only job. Cassie told the jury that Diddy forced her into drug-fueled sex acts with male escorts while he watched, sometimes sitting in the corner and masturbating. And through tears, she said she took drugs to numb herself, ecstasy, cocaine, and ketamine, all of it allegedly supplied by Diddy. She said the freak-offs included as many as 4 male escorts at once and typically lasted 36 to 72 hours. The longest, she said, the longest freak-off that she says she was forced to perform in lasted 4 days. She said they took place around the world, from New York to Miami to Spain to even Turks and Caicos. And at every stop, Cassie said the hotel rooms were stocked by Diddy's staff with baby oil, condoms, and drugs. And she says that these hotel rooms, this is disgusting, the hotel rooms were left covered in baby oil and covered in blood and covered in urine. Cassie told the jury that the freak-offs made her feel disgusting and humiliated and worthless. But she said she couldn't say no because she says Diddy threatened to release videos of the freak-offs with her in them. And through it all, she said Diddy was in control of every aspect of her life, where she lived, what she wore, right down to the color nail polish that she was allowed to wear. And if she stepped out of line, she said that he took her keys and her phone, and often she testified that he did far worse than that. She again became emotional, describing what she said was near constant physical abuse. This is a quote. She said, "He would knock me over, drag me, kick me, stomp me in the head." And this is what she talked about all day long in this New York City courtroom. We've got NewsNation national correspondent Caitlin Becker. She was in court for all of it. She joins me now live from outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Again, cameras not allowed, so Caitlin is going to be the one to explain to us what this was actually like inside the courthouse today. Some big bombshells. I know, Caitlin, some of it is literally too graphic to talk about on TV. I mean, some of it is totally disgusting. What were the highlights for you today?
Yeah, Brian, it's really hard to even hit on some of the more salacious, shocking, vulgar moments that she described on the stand, because they are too inappropriate in a lot of ways to discuss in front of really anyone here. I mean, you look at these sketches of Cassie. She's sitting on the stand, 9 months pregnant, taking kind of deep breaths as she answers more of these salacious and tough questions. You know, she did, and again, you said it, but I need to reiterate, these will be disturbing descriptions that I will repeat that she said on the stand. At one point, she said that a male escort had urinated in her mouth and she actually choked on it. And it was at that point someone in the courtroom actually had to walk out of the door there while, you know, Diddy sat at the defense table listening on here. But as she was describing these events where she said that, you know, there were multiple male escorts that were happening at one time, these freak-offs would happen for 2, 3, the longest 4 days at a time. And control is the word we need to talk about. That is what prosecutors really laid out. And you heard Cassie describe how every action during these freak-offs, which were between her and male escorts, not necessarily between her and her boyfriend, Sean Diddy Combs. He sat off to the side really directing things according to her and masturbating along with what he wanted to see. But he was in control, she said, of exactly how they did everything, from the platform shoes that she needed to wear, the clothes that she needed to wear occasionally, masks, wigs, whether or not the male escort could ejaculate, where he could ejaculate. Everything she said was controlled by him. Mind you, Brian, his children, 6 children, are in the courtroom at this point listening to all of this. And the jury was picked knowing that they needed a certain level of comfort to hear these types of descriptions. It was very emotional and really tough to hear, Brian. But to be clear, if these are in fact consensual acts, as the defense is going to claim, there's nothing wrong with having a non-conventional sexual appetite. The key here for prosecutors was having Cassie describe the fact that she said she didn't want to do this.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that, because the defense's argument here is that this was consensual, that maybe this is morally wrong, and maybe there was domestic violence, but that Cassie was a willing participant in all of this. What was her demeanor like on the stand? There was a lot of anticipation yesterday. We saw that photo of her outside, 9 months pregnant. What was the demeanor like? Obviously, she was emotional. Was there a point where she actually broke down?
There was, Brian, there really was a few times that she welled up, and there was one point where she broke down. She did seem to struggle, at least in the beginning, to want to describe in detail the things she says she had gone through. That one quote that you had read right before you brought me in was very early on after she had been sworn in, when she said to the jury that she was dragged and kicked and beat down. And the prosecutors really had to press her in order to get that information out. Before she answered it, she kind of did, because she seemed to struggle with wanting to give that answer. But as we heard her describe these, for a lot of people, grotesque sexual activities, for other people, maybe that's normal for them. But for her, it didn't seem like something she said she wanted to do. But that's not really where she broke down in tears. When she broke down in tears and needed a tissue and needed a moment to compose herself was when she described the fact that all she said she wanted was for him to love her, for him to accept her. And she said many times that the reason she continued to go along with these freak-offs is because it was the only time she felt like she had one-on-one interactions with the man she had fallen in love with, Brian.
And again, we're looking at these sketches now of her crying. It's hard, though, for us on the outside to get a sense of what this was really like. And obviously, she is the prosecution's star witness, and they've interviewed her before. Did it feel rehearsed? Did it feel spontaneous? How would you describe sort of her demeanor up there?
Genuine. Genuine is the best way I can describe
Genuine.
it. She did really seem to struggle with wanting to answer questions that were very revealing about her life. I don't know. There's almost a way that you could still see that in her there was some affection and love, not maybe for him in the room, certainly, but for the person that she once loved back then. She described her naivete when she was 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, meeting him, getting into this world, really not knowing how anything worked. She said she was almost completely sexually inexperienced by the time she met him. And there were a few times where she appeared sort of nervous and needed the prosecutor to repeat a question or maybe rephrase something something or refresh her memory. And a few times where she said, you know, I just don't remember. So, no, it really did not seem rehearsed in the slightest. It did seem like this is her story, and she didn't really want to be in a position where she had to tell it in this way, but was doing what needed to be done.
And just quickly, Caitlin, what was Diddy doing when he's sitting there? I'm just envisioning you've got his family sitting behind him with all these grotesque details, this woman on the stand. What was his reaction?
You know, first and foremost, he came into the courtroom and acknowledged his children. That is something he has done every single day. But during the actual testimony, when things got really dark, one of the mothers of one of his children had to get up and leave the courtroom. She couldn't sit through it. And you, Brian, have been in so many of these court cases the way I have. You know that the defendant is not supposed to react. But Diddy reacted. There were a few times where he was shaking his head no, kind of nodding along. There was a deep sigh at one point. But in two instances, one when they were talking about baby oil and the fact that it needed to be reapplied at sometimes 5-minute intervals because that's what he wanted to see. And then another instance when Cassie revealed the pseudonyms that he uses at hotels, that he actually pushed his chair all the way back from the defense table and kind of was like sort of taken aback by it. So that was very, very visible there. And he took a lot of notes and handed them to a defense attorney, Brian. And of course, we're going to get their chance to put Cassie on cross-examination and get their side of the story later this week.
Yeah, and you can imagine that team of defense lawyers probably told him not to react in any way. The jury's watching him the whole time, and yet he did anyway. Caitlin Becker, appreciate your insight on what it was like in court. We'll see you again tomorrow. Cassie's bombshell testimony even shocked Lisa Bloom, who's been a trial lawyer for 40 years. And Bloom, she was paying close attention because she represents a government witness who will likely take the stand along with two of Diddy's civil accusers, including Don Richard. I spoke with Lisa Bloom earlier today about what stood out to her as she sat in court and watched Cassie's testimony. Lisa, disturbing graphic details all day long. You were inside the courtroom. What stood out the most to you?
You know, it was a deeply disturbing day, and you're right. I've been doing sexual abuse cases for almost 40 years, and this is some of the most graphic testimony that I have ever heard, in depth. Cassie Ventura, very pregnant, looking like she could be giving birth at any time, very calmly answering the questions. Because I represent a government witness, I can't comment on a lot of things, but I can read things that are now in the public record. So I'll read you some of the testimony that I wrote down verbatim. And she said, for example, I made the wrong face, and the next thing I know, I'm getting hit in the face, referring to Sean Combs. If I wasn't smiling at him the way he wanted, she says she would get hit. He would say, fix your face, watch your mouth. When he stopped by her homes unannounced because he had keys, she said it was a stomach in knots moment. And she said recovering from partying was a big part of my life. So those are just some of the pieces of testimony that are now in the record in this case.
We're looking, Lisa, right now at some of the courtroom sketches, but it's hard to get a feeling for what it was actually like in the courtroom. You were there. You mentioned that she's 9 months pregnant. Did you find her to be totally believable, and did she get emotional at all?
So the court rules don't allow me, because I represent a government witness, from commenting on her credibility. But as to emotional, yes, she did get emotional, at least at one point. And some of the testimony was clearly very difficult for her because she would sometimes pause. She would sometimes trail off at the end, and she had to be brought back, you know, to where she had been testifying.
This was also interesting, Lisa. She referred to male escorts, these male escorts that she says she was forced to have sex with, as staff members when having their agent book travels. Does that go back to the prosecution trying to set up the sex trafficking charges? What were they doing there when they were explaining that they were described as staff members?
Well, let's talk about the top charge in this case, which is racketeering conspiracy. That is the most significant charge in this case. If convicted, he is spending the rest of his life in prison. And what the prosecution laid out in their opening statement is that this wasn't just Sean Combs, that this was a conspiracy, a group of people. And the prosecution said it was his staff members, it was his assistants, it was his executives who were all part and parcel of this conspiracy. guilty. Of course, the defense denies that. He is presumed innocent. He has not been found guilty. So I just want to point that out. But that is an important part of the case. So what we saw today was her being asked, yes, about staff members, about other people who were part of the situation, setting up the freak-offs, cleaning up after the freak-offs, and so on.
Yeah, and again, she described those freak-offs as sometimes lasting up to 4 days and just being brutal. Lisa Bloom, we appreciate you taking the time to come out of court and speak with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Okay, and before we move on, we did reach out to Sean Combs' attorneys today, requested a statement from them, but we have not heard back. So in May of 2018, a man named Jonathan Odie opened fire at Donald Trump's Miami golf course and was shot and arrested by police. Now, Odie said that he was in the middle of a bipolar episode. That's where it gets interesting. Later, while being questioned by Florida authorities, Odie brought up something totally unexpected. He claimed that he'd been a sex slave for Sean Diddy Combs and Cassie Ventura. This video is courtesy of Real World Media. Take a look.
I had sex with Cassie and Sean. Basically, he would masturbate and tell me what to do with Cassie. I had like 15 encounters, and I heard lots of business. Because what they would do is Sean talks a lot on the phone and on the TV with speakers and stuff, and I was like a sex slave.
So at the time, Odie's story seemed too far-fetched to believe, but not anymore. And now, in an exclusive interview, Odie opens up to NewsNation senior producer Allison Weiner about his claims, beginning with why he's agreed to talk now. Listen to this.
I felt bad because I got along well with her, and I think she's a decent person. And unfortunately, I had a suspicion that she was in a situation that she was in, but I wasn't sure. And now I understand the life, what was going on in her life, and what was happening. And him beating her up in the hotel shows me the type of individual he is, and confirms that everything that happened to me was true and correct and in line with his personality.
So he's speaking to us from a Miami jail now. Here is how Odie says it all began for him.
I was a male Chippendale, a model Chippendale, you could say. And they called me for a show for, they called an agency that I work for to do a show. And then I went and did a show, and things led to them offering me more money to perform sexual acts. And that's it. That's how I basically got started. I get dressed like a police officer, like a show, and they'll strip down. And then, they offer me some more money. They offer me some more money to do some extra stuff.
So Odie did get specific about the extra stuff that he says Diddy wanted from him, and these specifics were consistent with what he told law enforcement during the 2014 interrogation. Here is how he describes the atmosphere and how frequently it happened.
Candles, sensual atmosphere, lights off. He would sit in a corner in a sofa, watch and masturbate. And he'd say, he'd tell her, give her instructions what to do to me. Perform oral sex, rub baby oil. Then he'd tell me rub baby on her, perform oral sex, and then have sex.
How many times did you have sex with Cassie?
Probably like 15 sessions.
And what did you get paid? How much?
It would be like 800 each time. Each act. But sometimes they'll call me twice. I'll leave, and then 3 hours later, they would call me, come back.
And so Odie claimed that the sessions were drug-fueled, and that his concern for both Cassie and himself led him to get one of their sessions on video. Listen to what he says about that.
Why did you decide to record or video?
Because after she passed out, I decided to record that. So in the event anything worse happened, like if she died, or anybody died, it will be on camera, it will be on video, what happened. So I wouldn't be responsible for any of that.
So you were beginning to worry about her doing drugs. I mean, like about her dying or him dying or somebody dying from the drugs, and that you would be held responsible. So you brought a video. You brought your phone?
No, I had a USB video memory stick done like spy shop, and I put it in a wallet on the table, in the living room table of the hotel upstairs. I filmed it, and it had everything described, and it had her threatening me. But he was telling her what to say. We had an argument. When I left, I knew they were paranoid. So I wanted to guarantee my safety. So I texted him. I said, "Hey, if anything happens to me, I got evidence I've been with you." At the settlement table, there was a lot of irregularities, okay? Mm-hmm. It was my first settlement. So they brought me in, and Diddy had a T-shirt with two men in ski masks pointing, making gun signs, okay? Mm-hmm. And it was black and white, and it had a red frame, okay? But that's the way he operates. He communicates, threatening you, like saying, "I'm going to have you killed."
So Odie says to prevent the recording from going public, that's what he was just talking about, Diddy had him sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, in exchange for $5 million in hush money. This was in 2014. The Daily Mail ran a screenshot of what appears to be a signature page signed by Sean Combs and Odie. We have not been able to obtain the document or verify its contents or authenticity, nor have we been able to verify the existence of the video that you heard him talking about. Now, according to Daily Mail's report, the timing coincided with a spending spree by Odie of Florida real estate, and it also coincided with Odie's divorce. His ex-wife tells the Daily Mail that she found out about his windfall only after their split.
Basically, the day the incidents happened at Trump National Doral, I had to take a medication, and I'd been diagnosed bipolar, but I wasn't sure I was bipolar. And I had an episode, and basically I've been taking medication every day. I've been stable. I had no issues in jail. I had that excellent behavior in jail. I feel I'm ready to come out to society and be a productive member of society.
All right, so Odie remains locked up in a Florida jail, still awaiting trial on charges of attempted murder, armed burglary, aggravated assault, and armed grand theft. Regarding the sex slave claims, we've reached out to Sean Diddy Combs' team for comment and have yet to hear back. And thank you to Allison Weiner for that interview. We'll continue to investigate all of that.
Nothing could have prepared Cassie Ventura for the wrenching and draining and excruciating 2 days that she just spent on the witness stand, testifying against her one-time love, Sean Diddy Combs. But the next 2 days are going to make the last two look like a picnic. She's about to undergo a cross-examination by Puff Daddy's lawyers. And 9 months pregnant or not, it just may seem worse than childbirth. Since she took the stand on Tuesday, she basically has helped the prosecutors lay out a case against P. Diddy that paints him as a brutal domestic abuser with a sexual kink beyond the pale. Yeah, we heard it. We got it. But what she's really done that's so much more important and so much worse for Diddy is that she has painted him as a sex trafficker and a man guilty of racketeering, the very things that he's charged with. And if his lawyers don't come out swinging, P. Diddy could spend the rest of his life in lockup. So yeah, the stakes are high in this cross-examination of Cassie. At the heart of her testimony, she was claiming that she was an unwilling participant in Diddy's twisted and demanding freak-offs, sex orgies, where she was being sexed mostly. She said that he forced her to hire the male escorts and fly them to the freak-offs. Very key, because trafficking requires you to, somebody needs to pay, get you across state lines, okay? And that Diddy used his own staff members, she says, to prep the rooms and get the drugs if Diddy didn't get those drugs himself. When she wasn't in the mood or when she wanted out, Cassie says he beat her into submission and wouldn't let her leave. These are all very important things I'm going to get to in just a moment. I'm not just giving you color here. I'm giving you really important building blocks for the prosecution. Cassie said he'd also threatened to release videos of those orgies, to pressure Cassie to stick around. And she said Diddy was the boss of it all, the director of the freak-offs, where a lot of this illegal stuff was going on, she said. She told the jury, quote, "I feared for my career. I feared for my family. It's just embarrassing. It's horrible and disgusting. No one should do that to anyone." Today in the federal courtroom, she named and identified 13 of those escorts with whom she had sex on video and for Diddy's pleasure, she said. One of those escorts was Jonathan Odie, who happened to be a guest on this show just last night. Odie said he was Diddy's, quote, sex slave as far back as 2018, but that nobody believed him. And to be fair, it may have been because he said it to the police after opening fire at a South Florida golf resort. Yesterday, though, in an exclusive jailhouse interview, Odie repeated his story to NewsNation producer Allison Weiner. And he described what a freak-off actually looked like from inside the room.
Candles, sensual atmosphere, lights off. He would sit in a corner in a sofa, watch and masturbate. And he'd say, he'd tell her, give her instructions what to do to me. Perform oral sex, rub baby oil. Then he'd tell me rub baby oil, perform oral sex, and then have sex.
How many times did you have sex with Cassie?
Probably like 15 sessions.
And what did you get paid? How much?
It would be like 800 each time.
Another bombshell today when Cassie testified that after she and Diddy finally broke up, she says Diddy raped her in 2018 in her own living room. This was around the time she began dating her now husband, Alex Fine. And yes, Mr. Fine was in the courtroom to hear all of it. By now, almost everybody has seen that infamous hotel hallway beating video, right? But today, the court released more of it. And before I show it, I do want to give you a warning. It's quite disturbing. It can be very triggering. So, fair warning. We're going to roll it. We got a picture, basically, of Cassie here. And she eventually, after being knocked and thrown about, she eventually is stumbling down a hallway. I mean, this is just intense, right? This is finally from the U.S. District Court, by the way, not from a TV channel, CNN. So this is important because these are angles we hadn't seen up until now. Again, Cassie had a black eye and a bloody lip. And she said she ended up that way because she was beaten by Diddy right here in this moment because she had escaped his freak-off. She says she fled to her apartment after this and that she took selfies of her bruises, which, by the way, she said she had to cover with makeup 2 days later at a movie premiere, this movie premiere. This is her. She said she was thick with makeup to get rid of the black eye, but she said some of the bruises on her body were still quite visible, especially the ones on her inner thighs, she said. And while the judges ruled that the freak-off videos are not going to be seen by the public, today the jury saw 5 screen grabs of the freak-off videos. And at least one juror, a man, looked away. But here's the thing. Diddy is not charged with rape. Diddy is not charged with domestic abuse or drug offenses. He is charged with sex trafficking and racketeering, violating the RICO Act, which means the feds are trying to prove that he ran a criminal enterprise using his staff, his money, his power to indulge his own appetites at any cost. Let's unpack some of this with my friend Mark Geragos, defense attorney and co-host of the hit podcasts Reasonable Doubt and Two Angry Men. Okay, Geragos, first I have to ask right off the bat, nobody seems to have been able to get this from you. Are you or aren't you a member of Diddy's defense team in any way?
Actually, I thought I was here to talk Menendez, so I'll avoid that question. So next.
Okay, you can't answer that question. You are here actually to, is it okay to talk Diddy?
Did I stun you? My preference is to not mix and match, only because I don't think, Ashley, that I've done anything nationally since the brothers got the news yesterday. So I know how much you've been following their saga, and I really wanted to kind of focus on them. I thought that was their moment, if you will.
I have that planned for you, my dear friend Mark, but it's just, it's a few questions down from the Diddy Biddy. I have to talk Diddy for, can we just have, I want to get some clarity from you because I know you understand this stuff.
Do you know why I love you? I do, and I will tell you, yes, because you never stop. Also because, you know, a lot of times when I'm in court and I say something, even as recently as yesterday, the Menendez case, and the judge sustains an objection, basically the move is, and then gives you one of the hand movements that's like, move on, you know what I mean? So I'm used to that. I'm trying to give you that.
You're trying to give me that. Yes,
yesterday?
It's not going to work. It's not going to work. I won't ask you because this little nebulous, I don't want to mention whether I'm on Diddy's team or not because everybody's been playing the guessing game. Were you a jury consultant or were you on the team?
Look, I don't hire myself out as a jury consultant. I have been very upfront about the fact that my daughter is the one who gave the opening statements, and I have known Sean and currently represent Sean in a number of matters and have represented Sean for years. I mean, that's no secret. And I consider him a friend, and I'm not going to abandon a friend. So, you know, I've seen kind of the ups and downs of the last year, and I get it.
Okay. So you know I'm not a lawyer. This is why I always lean very heavily on you and others to help me navigate through some of the intricacies of these cases. But I've got to be honest, I don't know that I like what I'm seeing out on the TV with a lot of legal analysts who say there's nothing to see here. Because I'll be honest with you, as I've been watching the prosecution's case, I am seeing them lay out a lot of very specific building blocks. And here's where I'm going to show you I've done my research and then ask you if I've made a mistake. For RICO, you got to prove at least 2 predicate acts, right? 2 criminal acts over the course of 10 years. And these are some of the predicate acts that qualify. So 2 out of this list: assault, forced labor, bribery, distribution of controlled substance, extortion, kidnapping, witness tampering, dealing in obscene matter, obstruction of justice, slavery, sex trafficking, drug trafficking. And in so many of the details that I've been hearing, Mark, I'm seeing stuff that matches all this. The bag of money allegedly given to the security guard at the hotel saying, don't say anything, keep this quiet. I mean, that's obstruction of justice. That's bribery. The assault stuff that we're seeing, the black eye, the hotel video, that's it. Well, I got 2 right there. Where am I wrong?
Well, look, I'll take a step back. Everything that you say you can, I believe, could be tethered to or should be tethered to what the evidence is. I don't believe that the way that you've characterized it, and this is part of the problem with federal district court trials. You get kind of a report and it says various things and it ticks off various things. A lot of the nuance and a lot of the exact testimony is not what's being tethered to. If you were to see a transcript, for instance, of something that was said, I will give you an example. I saw a transcript, not in this case, but in another case, where somebody had said about a payment, was that payment or was there any investigation going on at that time? And they said, no. What was the payment for? Payment was for something else. That takes you out of an obstruction or anything else. So I don't know what the transcript says. As I freely said to your producer today, I was not in court and I'm still in LA. And absent somebody sitting in the courtroom who actually has taken verbatim notes, it's very difficult to say, oh, it can be horrific. Mind you, the opening statements kind of invited that. You're going to hear stuff. You're going to not like people. You and I have talked about that for years in other kinds of cases, where you'll do an opening statement and you will concede that your clients may be bad people or jerks or mean, but it's not necessarily criminal. And so I think you have to be very careful before you say, this is horrible, oh, therefore there's a building block.
Oh, listen, horrible schmorrible. There's a lot of stuff that's in there that's gross, and I think Diddy will struggle to ever get a reputation back if he beats this rap, period. But the dangerous stuff that could put him away forever, I feel these were some building blocks, and that at the head of the enterprise, he's using staff members to get these freak-offs, which are, dens of illegal activity. He's using staff members to set them up, which is the man directing the illegal activity. All that, to me, screams RICO. Now, I guess it's all up to the corroborating witnesses. If people are going to come in, and it won't just be he said, she said, but if the jury can hear more from others and be convinced. Now, like you said, you wanted to talk Menendez, and I know you have a hard stop in 3.5 minutes.
I'll finish. Well, one more point, though. Also, it's tough. We haven't gotten across yet. So what I always counsel in these cases, you and I have talked about this, and you're usually extremely good at this. You don't jump to conclusions just based on the direct. How many times have you seen in a case, I know that it's virtually every case I'm in, the direct, you walk away, you say, how are they ever going to get over this? And I've talked to jurors who say the same thing. And then they hear the cross and they go, oh my goodness, I really jumped the gun.
Oh, there it is,
so
yeah.
I would counsel against it.
Let me ask Joshua Ritter about that. He joins us now, the criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, host of Courtroom Confidential. Good to see you again. Actually start where Caitlin wrapped up. I wonder how the jury looks at something like that. You have a defendant in a case like this with a witness like Cassie on the stand, kind of, making motion, shaking his head, no, showing emotion while she's testifying. I mean, I wonder what the jury thinks of that.
It's all about optics. I mean, we talked a lot about how he came into court with gray hair and how will the jury respond to that. Well, now you've got Cassie Ventura on the stand, 9 months pregnant, talking about some of the most horrific things a person can go through. It's hard to listen to the reports about what she's testifying to. I can only imagine what it's like to be inside of court, actually hearing that come out of her mouth. Those 12 jurors, their eyes are immediately jumping over to Diddy. Every time they hear something shocking come out of Cassie Ventura's mouth, they want to see his reaction. And so if he's reacting like he's annoyed, that might play a role in their heads.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Let me go over a couple of examples of her testimony today. These freak-off parties that everybody's talked about so much. When asked to describe what they are, Cassie said on the stand, it basically entails the hiring of an escort, setting up this experience so that I could perform for Sean. Eventually, it became a job for me, pretty much. And then she went on when she was asked how it felt when Combs first proposed engaging in one of these freak-offs. I just remember my stomach falling to my butt, just the nervousness and confusion in that moment. Thoughts on the type of witness we saw or heard from on the stand today, and what it means for this case going forward?
I think it's setting the entire tone for the case. It's remarkable that the prosecution came out with Cassie Ventura as one of their first witnesses. She's going to last through the rest of the week. It's really going to set the tone for the entire trial, for them to understand the kind of control that Dan had, the kind of power that he exhibited, the kind of abuse that he was able to perpetrate against human beings. But the question for the jurors is really going to come down to, was she, as much as she regrets all of that now, Was she perhaps consenting to it in the moment? And that's really the question they're going to have to deal with.
Right, this consent versus, right. That it's interesting, though, but they set up a lot with the relationship. I mean, for example, when she was asked to describe her relationship with him, she said there were violent arguments, usually would result in some sort of physical abuse. That was her testimony today, and she talked about the fact that he was dragging her, different things of that nature. That's her testimony. Then when asked to describe it in more detail, she said that Sean controlled a lot of my life, whether it was my career, the way I dressed, everything. I just didn't have much to say, say in it at the time. How controlling he was, but also how physically abusive he was. It's, they're trying to get past that consent issue, it sounds like to me, from what you just brought up.
Yeah, the prosecution is using Cassie to explain this idea of the cycle of abuse. And how did someone suffer this kind of abuse and continue to go back to their abuser? How does she, in one moment, suffer this kind of abuse, and then in the next moment, she's walking the red carpet with him? Well, it's this idea about control and feeling like you have no way of escaping and feeling like you have no alternatives but to continue to go back to that person, and you're under their control and continue to suffer that abuse even for years.
Our Joshua Ritter, thanks.
Now, Jesse Weber is a NewsNation legal contributor and Law and Crime Network host. Claudia Colon is an attorney and jury consultant. And Derek Parker is a former New York City police officer, detective who headed up the special intelligence unit that focused on hip-hop crime. Great to have all of you here. Jesse, I want to start with you. The prosecution really came out of the gate with this very lurid testimony from this male sex worker who was paid to have sex repeatedly with Cassie Ventura. It was very explicit testimony, but also importantly, he said he witnessed Sean Combs being violent with Cassie Ventura in his presence.
It was brilliant to start this way. Why? A lot of people were saying Cassandra Ventura would be the first witness. You build up her credibility with other witnesses and other evidence before you call her to the stand. Remember when she filed her lawsuit back in November of 2023? Really wild allegations. A lot of people said, well, is she telling the truth or not? Hard to know. As soon as that video came out, and they started today with the 2016 video, it changed the whole game. Now, this is what's interesting about this case and the prosecution's perspective. They spent a lot of time today trying to convince the jury that this is a crime. This is not your standard garden variety sex trafficking or racketeering case. And because they spent so much time doing that, having the testimony of this man say, I saw him beat her, force her, direct her into these sex acts, it became so important to crystallize that for the jury on day one.
Yeah, Claudia, he really, this witness on the stand, really, it really set up a scenario where it didn't sound like she was a willing participant, where by the end of it, he was warning her, get away from him, you're in danger for your life. Where he thought his life was threatened, he said Sean Combs took a picture of his driver's license and kept it, and he thought that would be threatening to him. He said he was afraid for his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be interesting how the jurors react to what's happening. There's different things that are coming at play with this jury pool. It is a super diverse jury. That's a good thing for the defense. It's going to cause people to have diverse reactions to what they're seeing. So while it seems compelling to have that testimony, somebody saying that they feared for their own lives and that they warned the victim about their own life, we're going to have people who are going to still be looking for concrete evidence. They're going to want to see, okay, but what does the other side say?
Yeah.
They're going to be asking those questions because of their backgrounds and their experiences. And we can get into more of detail in that.
Yeah. And the other thing, before I get to Derek, Jesse, the defense says, and made the argument over and over again, that, okay, what you're going to hear is kinky, it's weird, it's bizarre, you're not going to like it, you're not going to like him, but everybody involved was an adult and everybody involved consented.
That's the defense you go with, and they had to own up to a lot of what is bad evidence against them. But they're making the point, we're going to dissect every element of this. This is not racketeering. This is not sex trafficking. I will say, they may have a little difficulty arguing the transportation to engage in prostitution. The argument that I understood today was, I paid these workers, Combs paid these workers for their time and experience. I don't know about that one. I think that one's a little bit of a stretch if you ask me. But saying this wasn't bribery, this wasn't kidnapping, they have alternative explanations. And saying Cassandra Ventura, who's the main witness, she called the sex workers, directed it, paid, dressed up. That's going to be very key to their defense, that it was all on her.
Derek, how big an issue when they make this argument that she was there willingly? is this video from the Intercontinental Hotel that shows, Sean Combs has not disputed it's him on this video, that shows him beating and kicking and dragging her by the hair. She is trying to leave at that point, and he is preventing her.
Well, they're trying to establish his behavior. They're trying to show that he has a violent tendency towards Cassie, who's the main person of this whole thing. And he's trying to point that out, that this is a behavior he has. Now, just to point out, that license that he took a picture of, that's twofold. One is because he may take the picture of the license to see who the individual was, so in case they come at him or sue him or come back with some legal defense later on, he knows who it is. The second is probably to intimidate or to know who that person was. So there's a twofold with that license that you just spoke about.
And also, Derek, we had the former security guard at the hotel who testified that Combs tried to bribe him by offering him a big wad of cash. He turned down the money. He did testify that it wasn't clear if the bribe was implied or stated outright.
Right, he didn't, according to his testimony, he didn't say that. But then he left out who the 7-foot person was that drove her away and who the person in the room was. Who were those people? You know, who are those people that might have witnessed this?
I'm Diana Felsen with NewsNation. I'm joined by Eric Vidali, who represents 2 accusers, Diddy accusers, in civil cases. You have been in the courtroom today as Cassie, Sean Combs' ex-partner of roughly 10 years, is speaking about what she says she endured during the relationship. Can you tell us what her testimony is like witnessing firsthand?
Yeah, I mean, so I can sort of speak for myself watching as someone who has represented a lot of alleged victims of sexual abuse, of sexual assault, of violence, domestic violence. And I can say that it is very difficult for accusers to talk about these things, not just talk about them one-on-one, talk about them with a therapist, talk about them with an attorney, but to talk about them in front of a judge, in front of a jury, in front of a packed courthouse, in front of video cameras, you know, are being broadcast to other courtrooms because so many people are here to watch. I understand how difficult that can be and what the bravery it takes to do that. I can also say that the courtroom, the people in the courtroom and in the overflow rooms have an aura of sadness listening to the testimony. There's been a recounting of some violence. There's been recounting of sexual acts. There's been recounting of trauma. So it's really just sort of an aura of sadness in the courtroom for everyone listening to the testimony.
Now, this is the prosecution's witness. She still has to go through a cross-examination. I spoke with someone yesterday with legal insight, an expert who deals with women's rights and sexual abuses cases. And they said that cross-examination is where the prosecution's case can be made or broken. What do you think of that statement?
Well, generally, right, cross-examination is very important. Direct examination is also important because that's what gives the opportunity for the prosecution to really set the groundwork for the case. You know, we heard from 2 witnesses before Cassie, but Cassie, of course, is Ms. Ventura, is the first witness who's really talking about, you know, more of the real substance of the prosecution's allegations. But so now that while this was the prosecution's first chance to really lay out their case with a witness, this is now the defense's first chance to really establish their defenses and establish their attempts to undermine the prosecution's points and evidence. So it is certainly, you know, this first cross-examination is always a very important aspect of any jury trial.
The video of Combs attacking Cassie was released. That was also shown to the jurors. How can that video impact this case?
Well, we've all sort of seen that video, and I assume you're referring to the Intercontinental Hotel video that was released prior to the trial. And we've seen, and you know, as was discussed, that was a big topic of conversation for a lot of the potential jurors as to whether they'd seen that video, as to whether seeing that video prior to this trial is going to make it so that they can't be impartial, they can't be unbiased because of the nature of that video. So certainly that video is one of the first things that was presented on the first day of evidence, opening statements, and one of the first witnesses. In fact, the first witness presented by the prosecution got in that video for the jury to see. So of course it is an important aspect of this case for the prosecution.
In terms of the argument, we know that the defense is looking to say that this was not coercion. This was a consensual relationship that had ups and downs, and that Sean Combs is indeed a domestic abuser, but he's not a sex trafficker. Right now, with how the prosecution is questioning Cassie, is the prosecution undermining the defense's strategy that this was a consenting relationship?
So, due to the local rules, I can't really comment on, what the strategy is or how that strategy was employed during Ms. Ventura's testimony. What I can say is what I observed, which is that the prosecution went very sort of methodically through Ms. Ventura's allegations, text message by text message, picture by picture, encounter by encounter, incident by incident, and gave her the opportunity to tell her story.
First with our legal expert, Deanna Paul, who's here in studio with me, the trial attorney, former assistant DA here in New York. Welcome back, Deanna. So as Caitlin says, it seems like the prosecution, in the term she used there, coercive control, but this idea that Diddy just was controlling everything in this woman's life, in Cassie's life. Pick up on that as they build their case. What did you make of it?
So one of the things that the prosecution has to prove is not, in terms of sex trafficking, they have to show not just how it happened, but what happened to get there. And so whether or not there was force and coercion or fraud.
Right.
So all of her testimony today really went directly to this idea of coercion, like you said. I think she talked about how he wanted to control every aspect of her life, from what she wore to what she did on a daily basis. He had like a security detail show up looking for her all of the time. And that goes to whether or not she felt free to leave and the level of control that he had over her.
So this idea that you're not consenting to something if someone's coercing you into doing something like that. For example, these freak-offs that everybody keeps talking about, she testified to that and described it this way. It basically entails the hiring of an escort and setting up this experience so I could perform for Sean. This is what Cassie said on the stand. Eventually it became a job for me pretty much. Then went on to say she, her stomach fell and she was just so much nervousness and confusion about that and felt like, like she said, it was a job, something she had to do, didn't have a choice. Is that effective for the prosecution?
It's what the prosecution has to do, but this goes back to what the defense opened on yesterday. They talked about the difference between consent versus coercion, and the point of their argument is that, these were two consenting adults, and even though there's some behavior that not everyone deals with on a daily basis, whether it's group sex or drug use or multiple partners, those are things that, while they might make us uncomfortable because it's so far off from what most of us deal with day to day in our daily lives, discomfort isn't criminality. And the defense is going to keep hammering home this idea that immorality is not the same as illegality.
I want to bring into the conversation, Deanna, we'll stay here in New York, Dominic Patton, who is also in New York, but down where Caitlin is. Welcome, Dominic, executive editor at Deadline. You were in the courtroom and covering the trial today, so I did want to get a firsthand perspective of what it was like in there today. What did you pick up inside the courtroom? What stood out to you?
Well, I mean, I have to say, my friend, it's a very, very subdued affair today. Cassie Ventura, of course, has been on the stand for almost the entire day. She's 8 months pregnant. She's clearly emotionally exhausted already by the testimony she's having to give. And the prosecution are taking this in a very step-by-step manner. It's only in the later part of the day that we really saw them kind of unveiling what is clearly their ability to get into the sex trafficking claims, which are really the heart of this case. Up until now, there has been a lot of well, you're a grown-up, grown-ups consent to things, and that, unfortunately, didn't seem to be sealing the landing, or stick the landing, rather. Now we're learning about the sex trafficking, about taking escorts over state lines, whole new ballgame.
That's an interesting observation. I want to come back to Deanna on that in a moment. But one more for you, Dominic, while you're there, is that, how did she come off as a witness personally? And did you notice any interaction between her, members of the jury, Sean Combs? What about Cassie as a witness?
Well, I would say, for one thing, Cassie Ventura is a witness, very soft-spoken, very emotional, crying frequently throughout her testimony. And let's be honest, these are incredibly, incredibly powerful and vulnerable things to be talking about her personal life. There was the naming of a series of the escorts, so about half a dozen of them. We saw their faces like mugshots up on the screens. Her good eye contact with the jury, didn't really keep any eye contact with Sean Combs, which we've heard is maybe the first time that the two of them have actually even been in the same room in about 6 years. But I still think right now the prosecution has a problem. It's not against the law to be kinky. It's not against the law to be cruel or controlling. What is against the law is hitting people and violence. But Sean Combs isn't charged with domestic violence. So now we're seeing if their sex trafficking claims strategy is going to work. The next few days are going to be truly pivotal in this case.
I'll be back to you for one more, Dominic, in a moment. But, Deanna, how does the prosecution get past that problem that Dominic describes there? Because that is an issue. I mean, they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these crimes took place. What's the key?
I think it's what Dominic just said. I mean, the defense has really owned some of the challenges in their case already. He was a domestic abuser. He was a drug user. He had a violent temper. But again, that's not what he's charged with. And the prosecution has chosen to bring forward really serious charges, racketeering and sex trafficking. And those are things that are usually used for human trafficking rings and organized crime. And so whether or not they're going to be able to show that this type of conduct, again, group sex, drug use, things that we don't see day to day, whether or not that amounts to federal sex trafficking and racketeering is a totally different ballgame.
It's day 7 in the criminal case against Sean Diddy Combs. Let's take a look at what happened inside the courtroom. Singer Cassie Ventura took the stand for a second day and continued to describe disturbing details of her treatment by Diddy. Ventura discussed medical issues, including infections and mouth sores she got as a result of participating in the freak-offs that she said she had to do on an almost regular basis. She told jurors she developed an opioid addiction in order to cope with these sexual events. Ventura said she felt helpless and that she couldn't fight back or leave out of fear for more violence against her. Ventura also testified about blackmail that was used against her, where Diddy would threaten to release videos and pictures of the freak-offs if she were ever to report or leave him. Jurors saw photos of these injuries, as well as stills from the sex parties that Diddy allegedly orchestrated. Prosecutors ended their questioning of Ventura, and cross-examination by defense attorneys will begin tomorrow. To break down this intense day, let's bring back trial attorney Ann Bremner. Now, Ann, the jury saw some very disturbing photos today, bruises, a battered face. They saw a black eye. They heard about some of the medical issues she had to go through as a result of some of these sexual events. From a defense perspective, it's not looking too good. Would you say that?
Absolutely. And jurors remember more how they feel about things than what they hear in terms of the words the lawyers use. So this was a very bad day for the defense. They've seen, of course, that hotel beating hallway video, I believe, more than once. And that's literally brutal. And then to see, the actual images that comport with what Cassie Ventura talked about and others have and will talk about, the visuals. I mean, visuals are they're going to stay with the jurors. And I think the defense had a bad day. I don't know how, all they're going to say is basically, we haven't seen the visuals, obviously, but, does she look like she's participating? Does it look like it's physical abuse? Does it look like, the way she's described things? Is she credible given what we're seeing in these depictions? So that's something the defense can try to take a look at in front of the jury.
Do you think that prosecution's getting closer to establishing the elements for the charges with the racketeering and the sex trafficking? Like, are we getting closer to getting there?
Yeah, I think they're about there, simply because the enterprise that he had is, when you look at the whole RICO charge in particular, I mean, he's a lot like R. Kelly. I mean, R. Kelly's label, his business, his enterprises, that's how he was convicted, because a lot of acts were committed, under that umbrella, if you want. And so when you look at Diddy, he had his own media, I don't know what you want to call it. He had actually his media station, didn't he? He had clothing line, he had alcohol, he had, all the bad boy entertainment, all these different things where these people work for him, but they also work for him in the bad things, like the kidnapping, like the bribery, like the obstruction of justice. You need a pattern, but it can just be two other, crimes that under that umbrella of an enterprise, a criminal enterprise that's committing crimes that he's the head of. So far, it seems through, at least to me, through Cassie, they've done a really good job of establishing that was the case. Remember, she named names of other people in the organization that were furthering his interests, his criminal interests. And so that was a good way to set everything forth early. It's primacy recency. And the first part of the trial is going to be important in terms of the jurors' memories and what really strikes them from the get-go.
Cassie talked a lot about the blackmail today. She talked about the threats that he would release the videos of the freak
Right.
off, so essentially like revenge porn. And I know the defense, one of their main arguments is like consent. Does revenge porn negate consent?
I think so. I mean, the problem with her account on this though is that there were other people, there, and she wasn't expressing a lack of consent. It wasn't clearly expressed. But yeah, revenge porn kind of trumps everything. The fact is, you didn't think it was going to go out in front of God and everybody. You didn't think it was going to be on the internet. You didn't think it was going to be on Snapchat. I mean, things like that. And he told her at times that it wasn't going to be. In fact, it was.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne, for your insights. Really appreciate it.